or heading there anyway.
Trying to get there, probably.
You might not have blown out.
Let's see, is this, well, that one isn't on. There it is.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sharp, for getting those flags in the right spot, too.
You're welcome.
I had received a complaint, too, but I always forget to follow up by the end of the meeting.
Those in attendance will note that we got the American flag back on the correct side now. Okay, we need to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. They look good.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Same, those opposed, same sign. There we go. Motion carried. Okay. Public comment. Slightly fewer of those this morning than there were a week ago. I think we just move on. Thank you. John, you're up. Good morning.
Good morning,
Good morning,
Commissioner.
John.
I've got two things that to bring before you. So, Shar, on the agenda, which one is first?
The van.
Okay. So the first one is the to approve the purchase of a human services van. We discussed this at some length earlier toward the middle of 2017 when we were working on budget stuff. It was one of the several different projects that we were bringing forward that would be new in 2018. As I mentioned, there are times when we need to transport large sibling groups or families, and a four-door sedan just doesn't meet the needs for that. Also, the thing that's really good about a van is its, I guess, convertibility to be able to fold seats down and have a flat surface. There are times we need to transport stuff. So say we're moving children from one place to another or whatever, and along with them comes a lot of stuff. Also, four-door sedans don't work real well for that. What has happened in those cases is we really don't have a county vehicle to provide for that need. And so I've had staff who've had to use their own vehicles. And I think that poses a certain liability concern for both that staff person as well as the county. We really try to use county vehicles for all client transportation for that purpose. It's also a lot more economical to use a county vehicle as opposed to reimbursing our staff's transportation at the IRS rate. So I spoke with Commissioner Arnold last week about this, and I also sent you guys out an email. I looked into the state bid for a Chrysler Pacifica, and I have a figure for that is just slightly over what we budgeted. And then I guess I feel like you should always provide an opportunity for local folks to have a run at the business. There's only one new car dealer in Houston County, and that would be right here in Caledonia. So I spoke with Ellingson Chevrolet. Chevrolet doesn't really have a comparable type of vehicle in the market. They have more of a kind of an SUV type of vehicle that really wouldn't meet the needs. We currently have 3 four-door sedans and a Chevy Equinox, which is kind of a mid-size SUV. The only model that Chevy has is called a Traverse, and it's kind of a larger version of that Equinox. He did offer an opportunity to look at a late model used with low miles, probably something that would be off of a rental type of thing. And I've been in contact with him a couple of times, and right now there's nothing like that available. So I thought I'd have another option to discuss. I don't at this time.
John, what is it? You mentioned the Chrysler Pacifica, but was there other models, or is that kind of the only one that was offered on the state bid?
They also have the Town and Country.
Okay.
I looked at Pacificas. It seemed like a vehicle that would better meet our needs. It's also kind of the direction that Chrysler is going with that, and I thought, you know, go with the newer technology, so to speak.
John, approximately how many times a year does this vehicle get used for the specific purpose that you need it for?
I don't have a number on that, but it's been a number of times. It's not like I really don't have a specific figure. I know that it's been brought to my attention a number of times over the last year or so that we've had staff that don't have a vehicle to meet this specific purpose. I'd also say that an additional vehicle will be good as well, because there are times that just our 4 vehicles are in service, and that also poses a challenge if we need to transport clients.
I know a couple of years ago, Human Services came because they had a couple of cars that were leased out. Like the car, are those leases still going? You know?
No, our last
They're-
lease ended this past year, and
Okay.
we bought out that lease.
Okay.
Personally, the way I look at leases is it gives you kind of an easier price point to get in, but they cost more over time. And so I did not look at a lease option. We're able to do some depreciation and such when you own it.
The reason why I was asking was I was just thinking if we had a car that was up on lease, if that's something that turning it back in and then getting a van and its replacement or something, I guess is more what I was curious
Yeah, I
about.
think mid last year,
Okay.
mid 2017, we had one of those 4-door sedans that reached the end of its lease period, and so we purchased that.
Sure.
As we'd done the maintenance on it, we knew it. It was a reliable vehicle and still is meeting our needs.
So this came in a little bit over budget.
Yeah, we budgeted
But
20.
are you gonna transfer or do a budget to cover it?
You know, I think that in our budget, we've got enough in other places where we would underspend to be able to cover that. So we budgeted $23,000 for this expenditure. The state bid, including delivery to us, is $24,119.
Okay,
So
okay,
it's about a little over $1,000 over.
Yeah, it's not like you're 10 over.
No,
Yeah.
no.
So basically, you'll absorb it in the budget.
Yeah.
I'll rephrase the question I asked a while back. How much mileage a year are we talking about? What do you project for the amount of mileage that we'll be putting on this vehicle for a year, in a year?
Again, I don't have that figure either. I do know each of our 4 vehicles get used quite a bit, and they're not like a vehicle sitting there that has, at the end of a year, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 miles. I mean, we're driving a lot, and a lot of times we're driving long distances. Say we have a child who is, or somebody who's placed far away. Sometimes we've had people as far north as Duluth that we need to send somebody up there to do something that Houston County Human Services is responsible for, visiting a child. We've had adoption families that have been in different places, and we retain certain responsibility there. So vehicles travel all over the place. If you'd like to know like what the average mileage is on each of those vehicles, I can let you know that, but I don't have that with me today.
I'd kind of like to know what our fleet is doing, but
What I can tell you is they're rarely in the parking lot. So today
Yeah.
maybe they are covered with snow, but they're always rolling.
yeah.
Last question. It's kind of maybe a little out in the future, but you know, is vehicles turnover, whatever, is this something kind of that you're looking at, kind of maybe going towards, is getting one or two vans? The reason why I'm asking is if we have a van and it gets used a lot, we find out, hey, we use it more than we want, and all of a sudden it's down for maintenance or something.
Mhm.
Having another van in its place. I mean, is that something you're thinking of, or is it more, wow, we don't need it as much, it's just for the rare occurrences?
I think I would. You know, my experience with previous county was we like to have vans. They meet a lot of different needs, and not a great big passenger van, more of a minivan.
Yeah.
It's more of a versatile vehicle.
Yep, I would agree.
How's this play into our policy that we're waiting on, Fred?
Well, that's why I was digging a little bit. Yeah, for people that don't know, Justin and I are working on a procurement policy because we're a little bit uneasy about some of the things that have happened, and so we want to try to clean that up a little bit. And we haven't gotten it done yet. I'll talk about that a little bit at the end of the meeting. But in any event, the situation is a little bit unsettled at this point. And I know, now I'll back up a little bit. Originally, my philosophy on budget versus purchase was, if it's in the budget, okay, it's there as long as it's within the amount that was set in the budget. That's probably okay, and it ought to just probably most of the time just simply be approved. Well, I've been through the budget process now, and I know that things like this, capital purchases, really don't get looked at all that closely in the budget process. And so when do we really look at this, or do we need to? And if we need to, how thoroughly do we need to look at it? And this kind of situation does give the board a chance to ask more questions about the purchase and why, and do we really need this, than the budget process really affords us, at least as the budget process played out this last year. And so at this point, I'm starting to ask questions. And I know that is counter to what I've said before, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I really, that's why I'm starting to ask some specific questions about, okay, how much mileage does this thing get? How many times, basically how many times is this being used? What, those kinds of questions that we did not obviously ask in the budget process. So
Yeah, Commissioner, I guess
I'll let you talk now for a minute.
Okay. I would agree with you. I think that the way I view the budget process is it's part of the discussion around a capital purchase like this. It tells you that we have planned for it, that we've built it into the budget. It's not in excess of, or in addition to the budget, but that's all it tells you. I think it's proper and right for us to come back at this point and say, okay, we're planning to do this significant purchase now, and reiterate some of the reasons that we put forth in the budget and give you the opportunity to ask more of those questions. I think that's perfectly acceptable.
I too, I know we talked about this at budget time, and you did give a very good explanation about looking other than the state bid. And a lot of times, if we have good department heads, I do put a lot of trust in their research
Yeah.
and go with it as a budgeted item. I mean, it's beyond my expertise, what kind of van,
Yeah.
and that's why we depend on the department that's researching it.
My question, I think we need to talk about this as a board, a little bit of a philosophical thing here, if you will, or maybe it's practical, I don't know. But John talked about it when we talked a week ago. Are we unnecessarily restricting ourselves, or should we restrict ourselves to purchasing vehicles that are manufactured in this country? John did not explore foreign-made vehicles at all because he felt that we shouldn't be going there. And I go back to the first tractor that I bought in 1974, and I thought that it was a piece of equipment manufactured in this country. And then the thing didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. And I finally found out the thing had been shipped from Manchester, England to Atlanta, Georgia, and somebody finally found the thing 6 months after it had been shipped from Manchester. They found the thing sitting on a back lot somewhere in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, the thing hadn't been made in this country. Oh. So then I'm asking the question, are we unnecessarily restricting ourselves as far as competitive bidding? They do, Toyota, whatever, do all kinds of business in this country with everybody else. Are we restricting ourselves by not exploring those options? I'll leave it open.
I will say this. In regards to Toyota, I look to NASCAR. You can only race in NASCAR if your vehicle's made in the United States, and because more than 60% of Toyota is made in the U.S., they're considered more of an American-made vehicle, even though their primary business is overseas. When you're saying vehicles made in England, I was shocked because Case in New Holland, owned by Fiat, and made overseas, but yet you have business headquarters, or their considered home base is the United States.
Yep.
So then I'm torn because, yes, it's a U.S. company, but they're made overseas. And then I look at some of the vehicles, when you look at high-end vehicles, say, not that we're going to buy Mercedes, but like cars such as Mercedes or something that are known to be a high-end, high-quality vehicle that are made in Germany. But then you got the flip side when you have like Kias and Hyundais and stuff, where what we found in our own personal experiences, they don't retain the value later on that the American-made cars do. Same thing with motorcycles. Harley always maintains their price better than Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, whatever. So I think that would be more of my concern, is the overall quality and retention of value later on, maybe.
Yeah.
I get the, and I'm sorry, John, we're kind of going off base here on your
that's all
time,
right.
but the whole thing, support American made. But when we have companies that are American companies, but they're just built overseas, then it's like, okay, well now it's dicey. Okay, well, so what is it? So
It's that job retention thing.
It is. It is. And I guess personally, I would like to stick to name. Well, I wouldn't like to stick to name brand, but you know, generally name brand. There's a quality behind it. You know that we could go with low bid, but if all of a sudden you get something made in India that is a car we've never heard of, but hey, it's only $400 for a brand new one. I'd maybe question that. You know, so I don't know. It's a dicey one.
But there again, that's why we depend on our department heads to research it before they bring it to us.
One thing that would be helpful for me as a department head is kind of some curbs. So if you want to look at all models and makes for this type of purchase, what is your expectation of due diligence? That would help, because then I'd come here prepared to be able to give you the information you're looking for so that you can make an informed choice.
So that's what Fred and I have been talking about with this policy too, because we've seen in the past where you have a department head come in and say, we need this one right there. That's the one we need. Well, okay, like the van situation. You know, we've got Dodge Caravan, Toyota Siennas, you know, Honda Odysseys. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. Mm-hmm. So we've had other department heads come in and say, that's the one. That's the one. See, this is the only one that meets the bid specs. But then the bid specs are written so only that one can meet the bid. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's where I think Fred and I have kind of talked about maybe that whole bidding thing needs to be a little bit more broad. That, you know, like for instance in your case, we need a van. Okay, here's all the manufacturers that make vans. Which ones? You know, where are we at? You know, mm-hmm. And so you're right, getting the direction, and that's kind of what we're working on is how to go about the direction.
For what it's worth, pardon me.
The other part of it, of course, is in this case, there's apparently only one American manufacturer that produces what John's looking for.
On the state bid.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Now,
there's
are there other manufacturers who do manufacture vehicles that would meet John's specs, but we're leaving them out because we're locked into from this country only?
Well, but you know, you've got Dodge, Chrysler. You know, I mean, there's Toyota.
Yeah.
You have those too that would be American cars that are. I think just about everybody makes a van of some sort except for Ford. No, Ford Aerostar, don't they? Or Ford
I don't think
Aerostar?
that's a current vehicle.
Yeah, John has some specific criteria that he's
Right,
looking
right.
at as far as ability to well, you say it, John. You're better at it than I
Yeah,
am.
what we did do is we went to the state bid to get a figure to start looking at this. And the way that works is you say, okay, we're looking for a van. And you kind of specify that, and they tell you all the different dealers who have been approved to be part of the state bid. And then they send you kind of what their bid is on these different vehicles that meet your specifications. Really, the Chrysler products were the only ones that really met that. We did get some bids for Chevy products and the like, but again, they were more of a modified SUV type of thing. So I think they're trying to, I'm not going to speak to car manufacturers' marketing strategies, but it would seem that they're trying to move part of that market to more of a sporty SUV type of thing. And it tends to be slightly more expensive. That's what I found in my research. So we did kind of say, okay, we want to have this is the type of vehicle we're looking for, and then the state bid gave us a starting point. In the past, when I've done this, I've said, okay, here's the state bid. I lived in a community that all the major manufacturers had a store in the community, and so then I go to them and they'd say, okay, here's our state bid for what we're looking for. If you can meet that, great. We far prefer to do business locally. Sometimes they met it, sometimes they didn't. So that was the approach I took.
Now,
And
if I'm hearing this right, the state bid process involves only U.S. companies, or does it involve?
I don't know. I I don't recall seeing, we may have filtered that out because I made an assumption that for a county vehicle, we would want to buy American-made.
Yeah, I understand. But the thing that's bothering me about it, of course, obviously, is we've only got one bidder that meets the specifications. Are we, in some way, I think somehow we're being unnecessarily restrictive. Either we're being too restrictive in what we want, or we're being too restrictive in who we're allowing to bid.
I think
where we're seeking bids, when we only get one, and there's literally dozens of companies that manufacture vehicles. I'm thinking somehow this doesn't quite make sense.
Well, I think we did restrict our options by saying American-made, and also a minivan that was convertible where you can fold seats out
Yeah.
of the way. Part of what I was looking at too is the majority of my staff are female. Horsing seats out of a vehicle to be able to make it be convertible was less of an attractive option. So, or folding and trying to make things work. One of the things that was very attractive about this vehicle and other Chrysler products is their seats easily fold into the floor, and where they fold into the floor also provides additional storage. So when we restrict our search, so to speak, for those types of things, it gets to be narrow. And then the state has a couple of folks that send us bids on those types of vehicles. We didn't have it so restrictive that we didn't get bids on other ones. We got some Chevys and different things like that. But then we looked at it and said, okay, say a Chevy Traverse versus this Chrysler Pacifica, which one better meets our needs? And that's what I'm coming to you with.
I understand. Are we to the point of wanting to make a motion on this?
Well, I still haven't really got an answer, Fred, we're holding up pieces of equipment already waiting for a policy. How could we?
Yeah, well,
Do
we're
another
not
piece of
trying to hold anything up based on waiting for policy that you don't have. We've got some time this morning, I guess, and I'm trying to get a little bit more of a handle on what might turn out to be workable in that respect too. I'm probably doing a little bit of that.
Well, and I would think until we have anything for a change, we got to go with what we have in place currently. Well,
And is that that's what I would like us to see do until we have a policy,
A new written policy.
a new written policy, we stay with what we have for a policy, not say we can't
Yeah.
do it and keep pushing a policy down the road and say, oh, you're on hold for a policy.
no, and I would think
I understand
the only thing
that.
that Fred and I are looking at is not necessarily that we don't have a policy, but just can we make our policy current
Right,
policy better?
or
So I would go with
updating
what
or
it is
whatever.
now, and
Right, until you have a new policy in effect.
that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's for sure. My basic question is, are we being, in some way, are we being more restrictive than we should be at this point?
In my
When we wind
opinion,
up with
if we're
basically
saying
with only
American
one
made, I think we're
bid.
being way too restrictive.
Yeah.
I don't, and I don't know that we have the knowledge or should be in that position. Whatever the state bid says, if you don't put the restriction American made in there, we're still going with the state bid.
Yeah, right.
Or, I don't think we want to go down that rabbit hole of deciding what's American made, how much, what percentages,
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
this.
I was just
When that's
throwing
where it
that out
gets
as an
dicey.
example.
It's like,
of
well,
what happens.
it
Yeah.
kind of is, but it
Yeah.
really isn't.
Yeah, I mean, that battle's been fought back and forth forever.
Well, and how many radios and electronics are made in Mexico when you see it? And it's like, well,
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. In the advent of time, we're kind of getting off the subject. I would move that we purchase a van as brought forward by.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion second. I hope there isn't any further discussion. Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. That got a lot longer than you planned on, a lot
That's all
longer
right.
than
I
I
think-
planned on.
It helps me too as a department head to kind of get a sense of what you're looking for so that I can come with information that you're hoping to see in something like this.
Yeah.
I look forward to your procurement policy update. I think that'll help me and other department heads as we come forward with this type of thing. All right, the second thing I have, I think, is a lot easier, and that's we have a contract from Tellurian. It's an organization that we use for mental health stabilization services, adult mental health stabilization. It has been I guess a resource that we haven't used a whole lot, but when we need it, it's a good tool to have in the box. We actually haven't used them for the last couple of years. We've had a standing contract, but in the process of going through all of our contracts and them going through their contracts with us, we needed to update that. We currently are using Tellurian for one of our clients, and so we needed to get that done. And this includes I don't know, about a 10% rate increase, but we hadn't looked at rates with Tellurian for, I believe, 3 or 4 years. So, so that's the contract I'm bringing forward to you. It's we've done business with them in the past. They're a provider of mental health crisis stabilization. It's a far less costly option than other hospitalization types of options in those situations.
So does the client go to a certain facility for this service, or is
Yeah,
it counseling, or?
usually what it is they've gone to, say, an emergency room, or they've been hospitalized, and they're not really ready to come home. And it's an option for us to help them kind of make that transition. Stabilization, that's how it gets its name.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the contract for adult mental health stabilization service.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I'm going to have a little bit more discussion. You have run this contract past our county attorney.
Yes.
He's had a look at it. Mr. Yount, do you see any red flags in the contract?
No, nothing that I looked at that caused me any concern at this time.
Yeah, okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you. You guys have a good morning.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, Sheriff.
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Thanks for meeting with us this morning. We are requesting approval of the purchase of a new in-car squad car camera. We did receive 2 quotes. The low bidder and the one that I think fits our needs the best is the WatchGuard. That's for 6 in-car cameras, which is not our whole fleet, but it would cover our 6 patrol deputies. That comes in at $34,970. Then IT Director Andrew Mildy has some purchases on his end that we would need to purchase, and that's about just under $5,000, $4,992, which is an access point and a on-site server for the data. We did receive a second quote from Axon, which came in at $53,840, so a significant jump in price between the two. And speaking with Sheriff England, we're going to use forfeiture funds to purchase the equipment.
Do we have in-car cameras right now?
Yes.
They're the regular dash cams, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Digital Ally is the producer of those, but they're, I think, 8 years old or thereabouts.
Yeah.
We've had one system fail on us already. They're at the end of their useful life. I think it's important that the board understands too that this is the project that I spoke to you several months ago about that we had applied for the Falk Foundation to assist because this is a scaled back version of the total project. But we unfortunately were unsuccessful in getting those funds. So that's why we've scaled it back to basically what we essentially need right now, and then utilizing forfeiture funds so it isn't a burden on the taxpayers.
I'll add to that too, is that this is an essential thing here for my office to prosecute cases. We had a case here, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, an officer was going home and he met somebody going, 75, 80 miles an hour. And the officer's squad, and it happens sometimes in squads, it activates if there's an accident. When he hit a bump during the road, when he was driving during his shift, he would activate. And so he shut it off because he kept having to deal with that all the time. Well, all of a sudden, he's in a high-speed chase that he's going to have to try to reach up to his ceiling and activate that and punch in his code while trying to turn around, follow this person. And eventually, the case did go to trial, and he was, when the defendant was found not guilty, later he was convicted of something else and went to prison. But he was found not guilty, and we routinely asked jurors if they want the video of this. And so it's really become an essential part of what we do. If we don't have that, I'm not saying we won't prosecute, but we certainly look at the cases through a different prism if we don't have those.
It's an expectation in today's world.
Yeah.
And I should also mention that the county attorney's office, this is actually kind of a partnership between our two agencies because the county attorney's office has agreed to fund the portion for automatic downloading so that they have immediate access to the video.
Okay, so now I have a couple questions, just generic questions I'm just curious about. So, like you were saying, you have to reach up and hit a button. Now we've got the consoles with the computers and stuff, but is there a way that you can put that at an easier accessible area than having to?
It depends on the manufacturer.
Okay.
This particular one, the control buttons are in the monitoring screen.
Oh, okay. And then my other question is I guess I was under the impression that it just was on a 24-hour loop, that it just kept going, but you actually have to turn it on and off, or does it automatically?
No, you actually have to turn them on and off.
Okay.
The camera will activate with the lights.
Yeah.
So if you turn on the emergency lights, the camera will activate, and I believe, I mean, it's an option, but I think currently we have a pre-record without audio, which goes back, I believe, a minute or two. So it is always, it's always recording, but it'll dump off after a minute or two. I can't
Right.
remember exactly what the setting is at right now with our current system.
Because you always see, like, for instance, last night when I was putting my son to bed, you get on YouTube and watch something else, and they see, it's in-dash from a squad car going down the interstate, and all of a sudden you see a wreck on the other side or something. But I was always curious, because that's why I was thinking it was always on to capture footage like that. I guess I was just curious.
Like I said, it is always recording, but it's not saving that data.
Right, it's dumping it.
Yep.
And then when you turn the light on, it says, okay, we're not going to dump it from this point on.
Yep.
Yeah.
From post 2 minutes. Let's
Okay,
just say.
gotcha.
And then there's no audio in that 2 minutes. But then as soon as the lights turn on, then audio starts recording.
Okay.
And starts being saved.
I guess I was assuming that's what was happening,
Yeah.
because loop in itself.
I think what County Attorney Yant was referring to is that the camera, it wasn't working properly, so it was constantly activating. So the deputy just turned it off
Sure,
completely.
yeah.
So the sirens didn't turn it on.
Yeah, the lights didn't turn it on because
Gotcha.
yeah.
Cool.
So I mean, it's just a good example of why we got to keep our equipment current, and like the sheriff said, our current equipment is starting to fail.
Well, and 8 years old and technology's old.
I don't
Yes.
suppose there's anything we can do with the old cameras.
Put them in commissioner cars?
Yeah. We have cars?
They're pretty outdated. I've spoke to one agency that would be possibly interested in purchasing one of our camera systems just because they're a smaller department. I mean,
I wondered even for backups, if people are using the same system, maybe pay a little bit on the dollar to have
well, what we
backups.
do is probably a couple of the better units is maybe put them like in our investigator squad,
Okay.
Things like that. Someone that's not going to need it or utilize it as often as a patrol.
Right. So you can
staff.
hold off on how many would we need total if we're doing 6 Nome?
We'd need 8 to cover all of the patrol
Okay.
staff.
So we really only have 2 that we got to get futurely then
Yes.
to
Yeah, it was my goal to try to get this accomplished with forfeiture funds. So I feel comfortable that we'll be able to maybe purchase another one either later this year as a 7th or possibly early next year. And then we'll be able to get the 8th one next year as well, I'm sure.
With that, I guess that poses another question. Do we want to, brainstorming, I mean, is it a good idea to space some of those out, though, intervals, so that they're not all coming due at the same time? You know what I mean? Like you say, oh, we bought all computers that are this old, and then all of a sudden, 10 years from now, you go, oh, they're all this old, we got to redo it again.
I think there's different ways to look at that. I understand what you're saying. Like, that would apply more towards, like, I would say vehicles. But when you're talking about a piece of computer, because they are kind of computer equipment, with the technology moving forward, all of a sudden you're going to have, gaps between technology. And I think it's important to be all in the same system and updating at once so everybody's on the same system. You don't have these 4 deputies on an old system with a different sort of software.
Yeah.
And then these deputies on the newer, because then you're maintaining different softwares, different protocols.
Yeah, that's true.
Can't do it.
The 2 that we would be putting on hold is for the lieutenants. So it's not as critical that they have the current updated version. I should say it's not as critical for them as it is the patrol.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'll move we go ahead with the purchase of the in-car camera system.
Second.
Just one question. Any idea why the disparity between the bids? That's a big range.
It's a big range. I guess I couldn't answer that at this particular moment. One camera system is, they have a lot of bells and whistles. I guess you've done more of the research.
Yeah.
Maybe you can answer that more appropriately.
The more expensive bid, the product that they offer it's a fantastic product. It really is. I mean, they have options that the other product doesn't offer. But the sheriff and I discussed it, and we kind of, we talked about, is it necessary? The lower bid will satisfy all of our needs, and it's going to give us everything that we need.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Trying to be more practical, I guess.
Yeah,
Good
fine.
answer.
In other words, we don't need the same kind of equipment that you might need in downtown LA or something like that.
Yes. And we're very satisfied with the product that we're asking you to approve. So.
Do they come with
Yeah.
maintenance or anything if we have problems with them, like say the last one did?
I believe it's a 1-year maintenance.
1 year.
Who
And
does?
you can purchase additional coverage on it like everything else. but
Right.
Is it cost effective?
That's a good question though. Who does, if something does go wrong, say 2 years from now, who fixes it or works on it?
The manufacturer.
They'll send somebody down to do it
Well, either that or we'll have to remove the portion of the system that's failing and
send it in. Okay. Gotcha.
La Crescent currently has the same product, and they're
Oh.
very happy with it as well.
That helps that you already know someone that's tried it.
Yeah,
then.
this is actually the same system that's in all of the state patrol units throughout the state
Oh.
as well.
So it's tried and true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's big.
Okay. Moved and seconded.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Gentlemen. Rick? I think you're next. Yes.
Morning.
Morning, Rick.
Morning.
Last year, I'm just, or last week, I should, last year.
It seems like that
Yeah,
long
it does,
ago.
it does. I brought before you the, 2 things. One is, the purchase of, restroom facilities for the drop sites, porta potties, and then also the, quotes for, quotations for ordering some containers for the drop site, some of our recycling containers. I know we had the discussion there of how we were going to end up paying those, and I was wondering if there's, if I could get that approval here, one way or another, as far as moving forward with this.
I guess my initial thought is that I would be for getting the 3 containers, and then we just find the money for the restrooms, you know, in the general fund or something to cover that, because I think that's kind of more on us as a county to provide the facilities.
Talked with Rick about it earlier today at our meeting, and, you know, if we don't, we do pay, we don't know how much exactly, but we're gonna pay a delivery fee, or else we send our own people and stuff, so we're gonna waste some by not getting it, that we're gonna need by at least next year anyhow. I'd just say, I think we should just, myself, after discussing with Rick and stuff, is get the containers and budget for the extra of the porta potties.
We do have funding available. When you look at the investment for the porta potties, it's $2,000. The maintenance will probably run $2,500 a year after discussing it with Rick.
Right.
The 2017 budget for recycling and solid waste ended up with surplus. So we could actually be using funds that were levied last year and use them this year to pay for the initial investment and this year's maintenance of the porta potties. I don't think $4,500 when you look at employees leaving the site.
Yes,
Yeah,
Is.
we got to do it.
yeah.
I'll make this simple. I will move that we purchase the 3 containers and that we purchase the porta potties using leftover funds from the 2017 budget.
And include the maintenance for the
Correct.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried.
Also, I brought before the board last week, and I handed that out, is for the drop sites there for recycling material that comes in from the public. That has been something that's been ongoing for years now. It's because we do stress the reduce and reuse materials as we in those drop sites, because there's a lot of good material that comes in that public can use and back out, and it really helps our bottom line of our budget too, by not having to pay that at a landfill. So in order for that to address all that, what I handed to you, and I've been working with Sam here, and we developed a public notice. And what I'm going to do, and I gave it to the Public Works Committee this morning, I've got the recycler coming out. It's complete now with all the upgraded material. Part of that is I'm putting a public notice within that. It'll be on the bottom of one of the pages here. And what it states is that materials coming in, that the public, if they see it, have an opportunity to take it. But I am also letting that up to some of the discretion of the drop site people, because what I don't want is a flea market going on too at the same time. And this material will be, at the end of the day, if it's not gone, loaded back into a container to be landfill. Some of the material, you know, we do like bikes, that's something that are put off the side that we can do, but when it comes to furniture and that sort of stuff, I can't control the weather. You know, it'll get rained on, or what, like now, snowed, that, yeah, at the end of the day, that type of material will get loaded and discarded. What I also working with Sam, and he brought the point up that county personnel, as that's coming through, will be, basically they cannot have them take this material, that it's for the public use only. I've been talking with Tess, and at a later date here, we will be revamping our employee manual and a new policy that will be developed and approved by the board here in the future, will be placed in that manual. And it will I'll go through that with the employees once this has been completed, and that we'll have that discussion with all the employees all at one time, another training session. But they're well aware of what's going on already, that the material that comes in, that they cannot have any part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess there's a part of me I'm gonna have to disagree with that a little bit. If the public, I guess my question is if the public is able to take something, then it kind of ties the hands of the workers there, that if they see something that they need or want or like or whatever. Now, I have a personal experience, and I won't name names, but one of the workers up there that we brought something in, and they said, "Hey, we really like that. Can I take that home with me?" And I said, "Absolutely. I'd rather see you have it than go to a landfill." I know back in the day it was started that was kind of one of the perks for working there, was that you were able to utilize and take. I don't feel that's going to be fair to the employees that the public can, but the employee can't.
I think it's a state statute, though, that we're following.
And I get that you can get around that by making a phone call and saying, "Hey, honey, can you come over here and get this piece that came in because I can't take it?" I get the loophole. But I guess to me, I just, so many things that are happening in the United States now that I think are getting looked into way too deep for what it is, that somebody sees something come in that they like, great, I don't care, put it in your car, whatever. Yeah, I guess I that's my only issue, is that so the employees that are working there don't get the opportunity that was kind of built in when this whole thing got off the ground a number of years ago. That's my issue.
Past practices, when I brought this up with the boards, when we first started out the program, that was, employees had scavenger rights, that type of material. And it has worked for years with us. And it is I think, a good perk for the employees. It was. And it helped us retain employees because they could see some benefit. We do get a lot of, like, say, the drop site people get a request for whatever. And if it comes through, just to put it off to the side, and they do that. And the people will get a call, they'll come in later to pick that sort of material up. I do know some of the employees there, they do take good material, or material that comes in that they can use. It's clothing. It's I've got one that just takes wood material. It takes it home and uses it for burning purposes, for heat. We've had to, since first part of December there, we've had to kind of cut that all off until we get a policy in place and how we're going to move forward with. I've had this discussion with Sam here. We've looked at the statutes. Sam has given me his opinion on that of how the statute is interpreted, and basically it is the way we've been our past practices and what the statute says are two different things. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I don't want to circumvent statute. I don't want to get anybody in trouble here, and I don't want to lose any staff either, just because of it.
Well, and I've gotten a couple of the staff have talked to me about it too, and said that they're very disappointed if they're not able to acquire some materials. The problem where this thing got off the rails was a past disgruntled employee that, to be honest with you, my personal opinion, basing this just off of my own gut feeling, I just wanted to get people in trouble. It was working great, and nobody cared until some issues took place, and then we started looking at it. Well, then as you look at it, you start looking into it very deep, and then, well, okay, I know we did this, but technically we can't, and now we come to a head where we're at now, after looking at things, and what can we do, can't we do, I don't know.
And there may be an option here in that it seems to me, and we've had asked questions about, because it seems to be obvious, is that when you take something to our drop site, we relinquish control, and it becomes our stuff, our
Mhm.
property. That's why,
Excuse me, Sam, could you please use the mic?
that's why we have fences around drop sites. And there's usually placards there indicating it's a violation of law to come in there after hours and that type of stuff. That said, at this point here, with the statutes that are seem to be on point with this, it seems to be somewhat clear that employees cannot have this stuff. And it's less clear whether the citizens can. And so we have drafted that proposal with the waivers. What is in the works here as well to fully examine what the rights are in the statutes for the employees. Ms. Eric Kruger and I have reached out to the auditor's office and to see what their opinion is on this, because eventually if there was some sort of violation, that's where it would go, is to see if I'm correct on this. If I'm not correct, or if it can be interpreted a different way, we can always come back here regarding the employee portion of this and redress this with the board. But at this point here, it seems to me just from the statutes that it's our property, and that we can't be just giving it to employees. And to get, not to get too hyper-technical, but if it's a perk of the job, or if it's something, that is something of value that these people are getting, and then, potentially you would have to report that as income for taxation purposes. And so, at this point here, this is sort of the more conservative approach on this, and it protects us as far as the people, because it's been raised to me by a number of board members that there are groups in the county that like to get salvage stuff out of the drop sites. This gives us the ability to have the person sign a waiver. We can keep track of who these people are. I mean, the more conservative approach would be nobody can have anything. And this sort of is the middle approach at this point. But the idea being is that we are looking into maybe there are options that we're not able to find at this time regarding employees. One of the reasons that we're able to come up with what we have at this point is because Rick reached out and did some research regarding what other counties do in the state, and so we have that as a template. But as far as is the employees, we couldn't find anything at this point.
Well, and in as much as I don't like it, I understand. I mean, it's the same policy as an employee from the county right now. If we get new computers, they can't say, cool, I want the old one. I mean, you got to go through the steps, and it's got to be open to public, and everybody's got to have. I get it. So I see why it is where it is. My thing is, and I read through the policy. I think it's very good, and I'm glad we are to where we're at. But I guess my whole point is, no matter what happens, I want to be able to see an avenue where materials can be reused instead of just thrown into a landfill.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that was the purpose of it, and I think your policy addresses that, and I'm happy with it. And if you need a approval, I would move to approving the new policy for the drop sites.
I'd like to ask another question. If we're talking employees, are we talking all county employees? If I went out as an employee and said, oh, my grandkid liked that bike. I don't work at the drop site, but I'm an employee. Does that cover all, or do we feel it's
To my
it's a
understanding,
benefit
legally, it covers
all county employees?
Well, hang on one quick second. Let's have some more discussion on this, but let's see if there's a second real quick, just so we're following protocol.
Yep.
I'll second it.
There we go. Now
So-
we
Yep,
can discuss. Thank you.
If now the question is, at what point are you considered just a citizen versus a government employee? Because if you go there off hours on Saturday, I am now a citizen. If you're there during the work week, because that's the same thing as if like when we have the bids for stuff out at the say out at the fairgrounds, could you say, well, he's an employee, he's got insider information on all that stuff, how can he bid on it? At what point are we kind of looking at this a little too deep?
Right?
I get if it's during work hours, you're an employee during work hours, versus I happen to work at that facility on the weekend, it's open to anybody. I have my citizen's hat on. Carol.
If we look at it in another aspect, I'm able to get a discount on the data that I have on my cell phone plan because I'm a government employee. They don't cut it off on weekends and say, oh,
Right,
You're not a government employee on weekends. I am a government employee.
right. Well, and I guess that's my question is there a difference? You know, but now the only other thing is then it comes to the point of that's now a perk of the job, just like being able to be an employee and have scavenge rights, like that's my perk. You know, I mean that.
I mean, the thing is,
you're right. I mean, how do you?
we're not talking a lot of material here.
No.
I mean, most of what all comes in gets loaded.
Mhm.
But there is a certain amount of material that, you know, is basically something that could be used again.
Yeah.
And you know, I've got a hard time personally with this thing because I am, you know, that's all we've ever done is trying to reduce and reuse
Yeah.
this stuff, and I totally want this stuff, you know, taken out. It saves the county money at the same time. I wrestled with this for a long time as far as, and I would advocate for my employees to have, you know, at the end of the day, and if it's still there, it's something they could use, why not? I got a hard time
Yeah.
wrestling with that.
Me
And,
too.
I would like to, and I think Sam's probably on the right track of, I don't want to do nothing that's going to violate or get somebody in trouble at the same time, but I'd like to further explore that, maybe with the, like you said, with the state auditors and see what could be, you know, what could come out of that. Like I say, at the end of the day, I would totally advocate if it's still something that's left at the drop site there and it could be reused, why not?
Mm-hmm.
That the employees could use. I mean, it saves the county money going that route.
Well, and I guess my only thing too is, you know, we talk about value to something. You say, well, it could potentially have monetary value. At the same rate, the dump site's considered zero value. That's why we're throwing it away. You know, so does it really have any value at that point? This is the end of the road, you know, versus, well, it went to auction, it has potential value. If all of a sudden it comes up, nobody bid on it, you could say it has zero value, nobody wanted it, it's now going to get thrown away. This
Yeah.
is the point where it's getting thrown away. So does it really have value at this point? You know, I get the metal
That's a
side
good
of things,
question.
you know,
And
Right.
And
the-
we've addressed that.
you know,
That
because
is-
the metal side always will have scrap
Right.
value to it,
Yeah.
which at that rate, then you could say we sell it at scrap rate, which at $100 a ton, it's about 2/10 of a penny for a bicycle. So you know, I mean, I could see the value side of that, but you know, a couch or something somebody's throwing away, it's
That's-
zero value. Therefore, that's why it's going to the dump to go into the landfill because there isn't any value.
It's a
in it.
negative value.
It's a negative. Well, actually, that's true. It's a negative value because now it's costing money to get rid of it.
Right.
That's a good point, Scott.
You know,
Anyway,
I think this is something we could explore further, and I think we can skirt some stuff here and take our chances on it. I really do.
yeah, and
You know,
boy,
I
if-
mean, we don't want to go against policies, but, you know, I think maybe there's ways of saying this policy is vague enough that we can make some,
well, and there's, boy, I tell you
We
what,
gotta start somewhere.
if and I think you're right, Scott. Look into it a little bit more. Go from
Right.
here for now, but boy, if it ever came down to some state thing and they're worried about somebody
Right.
taking something from the dump, that's good. We
Right.
don't have big problems then in the world,
Right,
but that's our
right.
biggest problem.
you
So
know, I know with a lot of stuff is, you know, it's of no value or minimum value is not the same as them having a perk.
right,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think.
that's true. That's true.
Anyhow,
Well, we've moved and seconded and discussed. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
thanks, Rick.
Tess?
Actually, we should be giving you money.
Right. Yep. Okay. How much did I take that couch?
You just have to talk to
And good
Robin
morning,
Ham and
Commissioners.
have them on.
Good morning.
There's the loophole.
Yep.
Honey, come down and buy them.
First item on the agenda this morning is the Environmental Services Office approved the hire of Tristan Quinn as a drop site supervisor. This is a 67-day employee as part of our drop site supervisor pool of temporary employees. And it would be at an hourly rate of $12.99 per hour.
I will approve Tristan Quinn for drop site supervisor.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries.
Secondly, I put on the agenda for your consideration this morning the Environmental Services Planning Commission appointments and Board of Adjustment appointment. As we were directed, we posted for vacancies and accepted applications for both. On the taking the Board of Commission appointments, we did have 2 applicants, and the zoning officer is here to answer any questions you might have. I am reminded that these are 3-year terms. They should be effective immediately through the end of December of 2020. And we do have a process that I forwarded to you. However, we have 2 openings, and we have 2 current members that have reapplied.
So the applications came from Edward Hommel and Larry Hafner.
Yeah.
This would be the second term for each member, should they be reappointed.
And that was all we had for applicants, so it's pretty.
Yeah.
Yes,
Pretty
so
good.
I thought since these are reappointments, it would be in the county's best interest just to go forward at this time without further process, unless that's up to you folks, though.
Well, and I think in the spirit, let me say, as the advocate of this, in the spirit of it, I think this is following the process which it was intended, that it's opened up, we reapply, cool, you've been on it, we got your information, keep going. But had somebody else been interested, great. So I think it's worked the way that it was supposed to. So I will move to reappoint the 2 individuals that applied for the Planning Commission.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, motion carried.
Additionally,
And I would add, with thanks to those 2 people for reapplying. I've just been to 1 planning commission meeting, but as I've said before, I'm really impressed with those people and their thoroughness and their concern to get it right.
additionally, Mr. Locker would like to confirm the appointment dates of the other members of the Board of Adjustment and have that go through that so that we do have that in the public record.
Yes.
It's not, these are planning commission members, and what I'm looking to do is just confirm the end dates, and I would like for the board, I would recommend that the board set those end dates at the end of the calendar years, so we can get a process of replacing according to a staggered term design. Right now, we have some appointments that were made in March, and they're 3-year terms, so to remove that ambiguity about when they end, we put them at the end of the calendar year.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say you could do it retroactive. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so instead of all of a sudden putting it at the end of, say, for instance, these appointments today, instead of being like, well, December 18th, or December of 2018, it would actually be, as of the first of this year, they just got appointed. Does that make sense? So it's not March, it's the
Whatever.
appointment would be January 1st.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's what Aaron
That's
was
the-
saying.
yeah,
is
that's the
no matter
clarity I'm
when they
looking.
started during the year, we're going to have an end date at the end of the
Yep.
year, so they get them all
That's
back
right.
on track.
Yeah.
But a question on that, Aaron, is should we be doing this, probably not easy to do, but should we be doing it
November.
in November or something? Because if we have the end in January and we have changing of guards, we might run into this process problem that we,
Well, and I think it needs to be looked at just like when elected officials are elected in November, but they don't take office until January.
Right.
The process should start in October, knowing that you're going out.
Right.
So we would have two appointments that are ending at the end of this year, and exactly what you're stating should occur. We should be beginning that process of advertising or
Yes.
Right.
implementing whatever
Yep,
policy we
And
have.
we can appoint them
Exactly.
before the end of the year for the
we
beginning
should.
of the year.
That's right.
Right.
We
Yeah.
should.
We need to, yes.
We should have done that
That's what we
this
should have
year,
done
but
to
we
begin
just,
with,
Right.
yes.
I
And I
don't know
guess-
what happened, but we didn't get it done.
Well, the other thing is, I guess we need to specify whose responsibility is that for getting the ball rolling.
Right.
I guess ultimately I would say it would be the zoning office, since you guys know who's up and whatever, that
And then-
your responsibility to come to the board and say, hey, these are up, first part of October, we need to,
We'd like to
Advertise.
advertise, we'd like to start our process.
yep.
Yep, and
Yeah.
I agree that it should fall there, and, looking at how it played this year, I was not adequate in doing that for,
It's no
Before
big
the
deal, we
board.
got it going forward now, and that's all that matters.
Yep.
Commissioners, does it make sense, though, then to verify the end dates so that we do
Yes.
have an
Yes.
end-of-year process?
Yes.
So, thank you.
so I guess to do that, maybe I will just go through what the end dates would be for each member. We won't need a separate motion.
Right.
But Robert Burns, his end date would be at the end of 2018.
Can you say do you have on there their terms, how many if they've got one remaining, two remaining?
I can. So there's 3 terms allowable, and Mr. Burns is in his first term.
Okay.
And he's actually fulfilling the unexpired term of Glenn Cruz. Do we count that as a full term? We
Well,
didn't used to, but it's almost a full term.
Good question, we should get that sorted out probably right away
Oh,
too.
dear.
well, I think you can treat it like the presidency too, somebody, you take over, okay, then you get your own
And then you get your own.
your own chance at 2 terms.
So how much was left? Say you took over the last 6 months, then you only got 2 more years you could be on? Or you fulfill that 1 year to the end of the calendar year,
Well,
and then you start?
It's the same thing as the commissioner, because we had that when Steve first got on, he was fulfilling 1 year. Yep, because we could only have the one term.
Right.
So you'd fill that out, and then when that's done, you could start your own term after that.
Right.
Which I think it won't be appropriate.
I do too, and then I think you'd get 3 fulls.
Correct.
After that.
Yeah.
You the
Yes.
first is
Yes.
fulfilling.
Right.
I just made a note, Commissioner, and we will bring back some clarifying language for you, so we'll clean that aspect
Great.
of the policy and process up for you.
Good.
Okay. So
And I guess real quick, going
With-
back to that.
With what you had just said, I mean, that's what
We should probably specify if it's, as long as it's not, somebody got appointed in January and then quit in February, and then somebody's on, do we want to have something where it says if it's less than 2 years?
6 or, well, no matter what, it just fills out to the end of the year, doesn't it? And then starts,
No, to keep the terms, to keep the staggering going, it would be. But what we might suggest, and we will talk about this a little bit, we might suggest something like if it is 3/4 or more in the first year.
Yeah, there you go,
Something like
there you
sort
go.
them all.
Yep, I like that, okay.
Okay.
So
Back.
we'll come back at a later date to discuss Mr. Burns' term, but we'll handle the rest of them today.
Yep.
Dan Griffin's in his 3rd term, and that would expire at the end of 2019. Larry Hafner was just appointed to his 2nd term, and that would expire at the end of 2020. And the same term expiration would be applicable to Edward Hamill. Richard Shield is in his 2nd term, and that expires at the end of 2019. Jim Weezer is in his 1st term, and that expires at the end of this year. And then Commissioner Arnold is the board representative on the planning commission.
And I will probably really expire before the end of 3 terms on that.
We say, so Weezer's up into this year.
At the end of this year, yeah.
Burns and Weezer.
Yep.
Well, Burns will come back
Yeah.
at a later meeting and give some clarity as to how we'll handle that
Right.
the term.
But at this point, he expires the end of December.
Yes, and with that schedule, the stagger works fairly well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
perhaps the recommendation might be to make that the term. This would have 2 terms expiring at the end of 18, 2 terms expiring at the end of 19, and then 2 terms expiring at the end of
Right.
20, and then the board representative is essentially.
That's good, 2, 2, and 2.
Yep.
So I think I'm looking for action on perhaps amending those terms to reflect the end dates that were discussed.
I'd make a motion to amend the end dates for the planning commission. Do we want to include Burns?
Yeah, I would at this point.
All at this point? No, for,
I'm
Yeah, I would.
comfortable with that. I think the stagger works well.
Yep, I would. Yep, I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, motion carried. I forgot to say aye, sorry.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the Board of Adjustment appointment. And just by way of background, we had 1 applicant. We have 3 seated members to that board. We're looking for an odd number, and I will turn it over to Aaron.
The board had asked that the planning commission nominate a member from their own to serve on the Board of Adjustment. They have nominated Larry Hafner to continue in a 2nd term on the Board of Adjustment. I would prefer the board to also take action on that recommendation, just because the language in the ordinance assigns that duty to the county commissioners and not to the planning commissions. I think it's appropriate for you to look for the recommendation, but I'd also ask you to take an action on that nomination.
I'll make a motion to appoint Larry Hafner, you said, to the Board of Adjustment.
For a 3-year term again?
Well, that can go year by year, depending if the planning commission wants to appoint someone next year.
So
Aaron,
is it a 1 year?
is it a 1 year or is it?
Well, it wouldn't be necessarily a term.
There,
It's just an appointment.
They're 3-year terms as well. So if he were,
Okay.
my recommendation would be that as he was just reappointed to the planning commission, it has to be a member who's on the planning commission. So they need to somewhat match up. And if he were to not serve on the planning commission, we would need a new representative from that. But his appointment to the planning commission runs until 2020. I believe you could make an end date that mirrors his planning commission.
But let me just go back. I think, are we looking into this too deep? Because it's the same thing with Fred being appointed from the Board of Commissioners. You wouldn't say, well, Fred's term on the Planning Commission runs 3 years, when the board next year could say,
No.
we're going to have somebody else. So,
Well, you weren't on planning commission for 3 years.
no,
You
exactly.
were there for 1 and
Right.
said, hey, I can't take this anymore.
Well, I'd
It's
like
too
to do it. I just
much,
wanted to
yeah.
pass the torch. But
It's
yeah,
just too
exactly.
much, yeah.
And I guess I'm thinking, like with Larry kind of being the same way, it wouldn't necessarily be a term. It's just he's appointed until somebody else wants to do it.
But then,
We would need a reappointment, though, if he were to go beyond the 3 years, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what you're saying is having a maximum before they'd have to reappoint somebody.
All these appointments are at the pleasure of the board. So, when we're stating end dates, you could change that
Sure.
next week, should you wish to.
Okay, I get what you're
Yeah,
saying. So
okay.
just to have something that somebody couldn't say, I want to be on it for 20 years, or for my full 9 years of being on the, is what you're saying, right?
Theoretically,
Yeah.
that could happen, I suppose, if somebody could serve 9
Mhm.
years on the planning commission and 9 years on the Board of Adjustment.
Which is fine if that's
No.
what the
It-
planning
the-
commission wanted to do, fine.
the planning
The end
commission,
dates-
go ahead,
I'm
Jess.
sorry. The end dates simply give you a methodical process for transition. Certainly, all of, as Mr. Locke said, all these positions are at the will of the board. But we're just looking at having, so that folks know what the expectation if they come forward as a citizen to serve,
So what,
as well as for
I-
us having a process.
I personally would much rather see that planning commission appointee to the Board of Adjustment be a 3-year term? I don't know whether that's, I'm not clear about whether that's in the language or not,
It's what we've done in the past.
but it's what's been done.
Yeah.
So logically, yeah, and the other Board of Adjustment appointees are 3-year terms. And so in order to establish, as Tess was saying, in order to establish a reasonable rotation on that Board of Adjustment, wouldn't it make sense to have that one be also?
Well, it'd have an end time. You'd say you can serve up to 3 years, but if you don't want to serve, you
Yeah.
can always step down
Yeah.
and they can reappoint somebody
Well,
else.
Yeah, but that's true anytime.
Yeah, exactly. Right,
Yeah,
right.
so, yeah.
The
although-
difficulty, I'm sorry, but the difficulty with that, the 3-year term, would be if, for instance, the planning commission had nominated Ed Hamel to be the representative.
Yeah,
his
and he's
planning
gonna
commission
be
term
up
would have
by
been
then.
up, and that would have made him necessary to have another member of the planning commission should he have not been reappointed to the planning commission.
Right.
So some things have to fall into place in order for those terms to work.
Well,
Well,
then somebody different could simply be appointed to fill out the term.
but then the question is, are we looking at this with too big of or too fine of a microscope?
Yeah.
If your term on the planning commission, say you just get on, and you go to the Board of Adjustment, and you want to be on there for 9 years, you can. If all of a sudden you want to be on the Board of Adjustment, and you have 1 year left, okay, just know that I only have 1 year left that I'm eligible to be there. Like, I mean, are we really looking at it too deep for a term for that particular individual, because they can only be on in accordance to what their term on the planning commission is? So therefore, is it even an issue?
It could be, I guess, if we're appointing for 3-year terms, and
But that's why I'm saying, do you have a term? Because if you say you got a 3-year term, but then somebody gets on that's only got, 2 years left of their term, well, then you'd say, well, we have to appoint somebody to fill his position anyway. Yeah, so then what are we even talking about? Just appoint somebody to be on there and just know that they can only be on there as long as they're on the planning commission. Whether it's 9 years, 1 year, 2 years, it doesn't matter.
okay.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Are we looking at this whole term thing a little too deep?
Yes,
Because
we are.
they only can be on there in accordance to their planning commission term. Therefore, unlike the people that serve on the Board of Adjustment only, their terms matter. But
Sure.
the planning commission is only as long as their planning commission is, so really it's kind of a moot point,
It is.
is what I'm getting at.
I think that's an appropriate way to look at it, the way you
Okay.
stated that, so we
Okay.
could not have an end date here. And
I wouldn't worry about the representative, doesn't matter. Now, with that, the expansion of the,
We have a motion and no second.
oh, do we again?
Yeah.
Gosh, we do that a lot. Second.
You made the motion.
Yep.
Darn it!
And we have a second.
Okay,
Now we
Teresa.
just gotta have an eye.
Okay, now.
Or
do-
finish discussion.
Well, the last thing I was going to say is we talked about expanding the Board of Adjustment to 5 members.
And I think we're going to transition to that.
That's this
after
fall.
We got to deal with that, but
That's coming up next.
Yep.
I think we got to deal with the motion first.
Oh,
before
yeah,
we can
we're talking
open
about that.
discussion.
Yes.
Today?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Okay.
okay.
Ahead of myself. All right.
Cart.
call the vote.
The relationship between the cart and the horse. Yeah, okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Motion carried. Now.
Well, and I caused part of that confusion, Commissioner, because I had introduced that prior.
No problem.
So that is where we're at on the edge. Is we have 1 applicant, we have 3 members on the BOA, and if we appoint a 4th, that is an even-numbered board. You have a couple of options. We can go out and repost and see if we can't get
Or more.
more applicants, so that we can look to see if we can actually field a board of 5.
Yep, and I would say that I would take your applicant now, get them going, and then open it up that there's still another one.
Do we get them going though if we,
We don't want to.
we can appoint them if we have another one? Because we don't want to end up with a four-man board.
Well, I'd say it's the same
Well-
thing as we have right now. We have four. Technically, we have four. You know, the business is what it is. We don't have the. You know, you still have a quorum. You still are within your legal amount. It's not ideal,
We have 3
however.
on there now, right?
No, but I'm saying like right now, we have 4 commissioners. Like we
Oh.
have 5, but there's only 4. The
Oh,
meeting
I see.
still takes place. You don't say, well, okay, we're not going to hold a meeting because we don't have an odd number. You'd say, okay, we'll go through with it. If it does come to a stalemate, then that's just what it is. That's how that works. But I would continue to open up for that position in the meantime. You
So
know.
you're saying let's appoint this person that applied and
Yeah.
then open it up for a search for the 5th?
Yep, I would.
That's
That's a
what I'm
motion.
understanding. Yeah, and that, I think that's the
make a
logical,
motion
logical
to do
approach.
that.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I will second that.
Do you have the person's name?
I
Somewhere it's there,
Put you on the
yes.
spot, Teresa.
I know you sent it to us.
Kenneth Anderson is
Oh,
the
yeah,
name.
Ken Anderson. I do know him because I worked with him on the
I just wanted to make
extension
sure that we
committee.
had a name put to it.
Yep.
Ken Anderson,
Yes.
which he
And
already
you
is
folks
on
have
there.
reviewed his
Yeah.
materials.
Okay.
Okay.
And this would be an entirely separate motion. After this one is done, then I think we need to make a motion.
Yeah.
If it passes, at least we need to make a motion to
Carry on.
Carry on,
try to
yeah.
get a 5th member
Right.
on that.
You want it
on
to be
that
2
board of
separate
adjustment.
motions instead of?
It's 2 separate
Okay, so
motions
I'll
at
make
this
a
point.
motion at this
In
point
my
to
mind as chair, that's what it is,
appoint
it's 2 separate.
Ken Anderson to the Board of Adjustment.
Yeah.
For a term to conclude at the end of, first term to conclude at the end of 2020.
Right.
2021. 3 years?
Yeah. Well,
20.
18, 19, and 20, end
18,
of
19,
20.
20.
18, 19,
20,
18, 19, and 20.
18, 19, and 20.
But it should be at the end of 20.
That's what I,
21
Yeah.
would be 4 years.
Yeah, right.
Into 20.
that's what I said, at the end of 20.
Yep.
Mhm.
18.
December 31st,
yeah.
2020.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep. I'll reaffirm my second.
It's getting late. You're good.
Yeah.
I know.
We're having a struggle.
I'm gonna start
Okay.
packing a lunch for this meeting.
I lost track there of the discussion. We did get a second on that?
Yeah, I said I reaffirm the second.
Okay,
on
very
that.
good. Any further discussion? Okay, those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Oh, I forgot to say aye. I'm sorry. Okay.
And I will move that we continue to post an opening for the 5th position on the Board of Adjustment.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Okay, those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm now requesting that we go into, actually, I would request we take a brief 3 to 5 minute recess so I can
Yeah, I would agree with that.
check to see if the
agree
union
also.
is here.
Okay, very good.
And
We're in recess for approximately, what did you say, 5 minutes?
5 at the outside, yep.
Okay, fine. Reconvened.
Hey, Commissioner, pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 2B, I am requesting that the board go into closed session for the preliminary consideration of allegations or charges against an individual subject to its authority. I am informed the individual does not want this meeting open, so we will be in closed session. And it is for the purpose of addressing Step 3 grievance for Mr. Bruce Shore's termination.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Closed session.
Yeah, I'll say.
Okay, folks, we need a motion to open the meeting.
I just did.
I'll second it.
Second, okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Meeting's open.
So we're back in. Gather lots of information.
I scribbled on it.
Yeah, you need this back too, I suppose.
Is there,
Oh, let's see now.
okay, I got it. I think it was
Yeah,
one.
okay, very good.
Board's in open session now.
We are in open session.
The board met in closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D05, subdivision 2B, for the consideration of allegations of charges against an individual subject to its authority. More specifically, it was a step 3 grievance by LALS Unit 60 for a step 3 grievance for to discuss the previous termination of Blue Shores.
And I guess I would move that we continue this meeting on to the next board meeting, and give us time to take into consideration the information that was provided to us today.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you for stopping in. Drive safe too.
Thank
The
you.
roads are decent coming in.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
It was a long drive in.
Oh, be careful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Action items?
I'll make a motion to approve the claims, Human Service and License Center.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carried. The second item on action items.
Ground lease addendum.
Yeah, she sent it
Meaning what?
to us.
Okay,
Oh,
the
Go ahead.
hangar was owned by Greg Wennis years ago. He sold it to Ryan Jepson, I'm not sure what year. Ryan Jepson has now sold it back to Greg. So we're doing an addendum to basically a signed lease agreement, is how I take it. Is that correct, Sam?
Okay.
Shall I saw it? I'll make a
Formal.
motion to approve the airport ground lease addendum.
Second.
Those, oh yeah, I got tangled up there. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, motion carried. Consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay. Those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carried. Discussion items.
You never give me enough time for all the things I want
Want
to
me to
bring
go-
up.
Want me to go first?
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay.
We'll go backwards. The one thing I just wanted to bring up quick on the, I had a meeting this morning with Public Health Director Mary Marshall and our Human Services Director John Puglisa. Jack and I, in our committee meetings, have been discussing this for quite a while. Mary and John, we got talking about looking at potential space and efficiency that could be done throughout the county. When we look at, we had talked about the old jail and the reuse, and we're talking about the highway department building, and we talk about, you know, is there something we could do differently with the Meyer Furniture Building and whatever. Anyway, the two departments would like to kind of get some direction from the board. If I guess they're looking for direction from the board to go ahead and look for, to be able to do kind of a space study, look at different efficiencies within their two departments, if there's any collaboration between the two, reorganization structure, that kind of stuff. I just mentioned that I would bring it up, talk to the board, and they were just kind of hesitant a little bit on doing anything or having too much discussion without direction from the board, which I am fine with. I'm always up for looking at, you know, different ways of doing business. So I said I'd bring that up for discussion.
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I'd like him to kind of report to you and Jack.
Yeah, and I
Kinda,
think-
you know, somebody to kind of keep it corralled in the right direction and
Correct.
help them work with the other departments if they're going in and looking, well, how many square feet do you have, and not
Right.
upsetting the whole place to do it,
I
you
agree.
know.
I agree. Yeah, and I can tell them that, and even coming and reporting to the board in its entirety too. So
Yep.
we're all on the same page.
Right.
I think would be good to do too. So,
Right.
yeah, that's a good point.
So I think we definitely, you know, we're gonna be making some moves pretty eventually here, so
Yeah.
we should be office space after going to the jail reuse study, we need to know where we could and couldn't before we can make any major moves.
Well, and I think that was kind of their whole point, is not that anything's going to happen, but before we can make an educated decision on something, we have to have an idea of the possibilities,
Yeah.
which I think is absolutely correct. So,
Yeah, let
No,
them,
I think,
let
yeah,
them proceed.
we needed an office spatial study done fairly soon of some type anyhow.
what do you think? You want to just say by consensus of the board we agree to this, or do you think we need to do a formal motion,
Yeah.
just consensus?
Consensus.
I think just consensus, you guys are on the committee, you can take it to your committee and say, no, I think we should do something.
Okay. I will let them know.
Okay. Scott?
County Highway, shop. We got, we were supposed to meet last night with the Fair Board again, and that got canceled, so we're gonna meet Thursday night. And, parking arrangements. We got a new drawing from the county shop on moving parking more to the north side of their area.
Yeah.
And we'll meet them again on Thursday night and hopefully be able to be back with something. Me and Fred are discussing moving forward with a small committee to start looking into best practices and ways of building and what with some community members, and trying to form a committee that would have people on it that are construction minded but not bidders.
Yeah, good idea.
Okay.
That's
That's
about
you?
it for me.
Okay.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Number one.
Hey, save me 30 seconds at the end.
Hey, if Justin can talk 20 minutes, I can too. No, yeah, I was supposed to have a township association meeting last night, but that too got canceled till tonight. Speaking of Board of Health, I sat with commissioners from Fillmore County. They were all at the meeting, and our staff was there, and they didn't get the message right away because Mary was in Texas,
Message that we weren't making
that
it.
we weren't coming. And they cannot have a meeting without Houston County being there, even if all of them are, because it's a joint, it's
Right.
advertised meeting. And so I kind of feel like we should send them an apology.
Mary Marshall.
I already have.
Oh, did you do that already?
Yes, as
Okay.
chair, I sent a note of apology email to Bobby Vickerman and asked her to share it with the board.
Okay, thank you. I had that down to do that too.
Good
so-
job, Chair.
Yeah.
Mary mentioned that same thing today. She said, even for our employees that were there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because
Nice.
I guess I didn't know Mary was gone, so I was assuming she would have gotten the message to her
Yeah,
employees. And,
I knew during the course of the meeting, I found out that Mary was gone,
Yeah.
and at that point in time, hey, we had no choice.
Yeah.
Have
We
we-
couldn't send anybody, we were stuck with a situation.
Right.
I'll talk
just-
about,
okay.
in my public comment section, I'll talk a little bit about a possible remedy for some of that, but
Okay, that's what I was
I'll
gonna
let
say.
you
We
go
need to
first.
Yeah,
look at a change here.
right. I did go to the legislative conference. Did you make it at all, Fred?
No.
Okay, because your name was
I-
on the list of registered people, so
Yeah,
I thought.
I
But anyway, they did a
didn't
day at
make
the
it.
Capitol on Wednesday, and there was over 300 commissioners from across the state that made it to this meeting, and they loved it. They all got to meet with their legislators, both representative and senators, and got a lot of information, and they showed unity as a county association, really. And one of the big things, and Char would probably like that, is the license center, that they are coming up, the legislators were coming up with ideas that maybe they could put more fees on it to help pay for it, and almost every commissioner and every auditor that was there said, no, you're not taxing the people for your mistake.
Yeah, your screw up.
They screwed up, and so, and there again, we showed unification.
Good.
So they really got that point across, too. I thought that was good. I did not go to that because I had a funeral that morning. I also met with a lot of counties and county administrators that were there about our search for getting an administrator and process and everything.
Yeah.
And I got the name of, from almost 7 different counties of the person that they used as a consultant, and I gave you each a copy of that. And they said that it's costly, you know, it'll cost us something, I don't know how much. But it really makes a difference. They help you write your job description. They help you go through the posting of it. And if they get 25 applicants, they'll narrow it down to 3 or 4, whatever we want. And they have done this for counties across the whole state. So I gave the information because I know that Fred and Justin are working on that, of who to contact to do an RFP for that if we want to move forward.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
It's
And
on
she
your
just drafted
pile.
off today.
Okay, it's
I just,
okay,
I
there
brought
we
it from
go.
the,
Okay.
from my meeting.
I didn't relate it to what you were saying yet. I
Okay,
hadn't
well,
looked
I
at it
just
closely.
picked it
Thank
up
you.
last Thursday, so I didn't have time to get it to,
That's fine.
get it on our agenda. But that is information, and that's the person to talk to. And he's been used by many counties for this particular job,
Yeah,
so.
okay. Very good.
And also, the administrator in Winona said if we have any questions, we can talk to Ken, and I can't think of his last name right now.
Fritz.
But-
Ken Fritz.
Fritz, there you go. He's very willing to help us with anything if we want. And I met with that Craig Oscarson that spoke to us too, and he's the one that insisted that we contact this other guy. Our extension committee was very, very good this time. We had a university person talk about the diversity of the state. Now, our county doesn't have a real problem with it compared to a lot of counties with Somalians and Laos and Hmongs and, you know, with their businesses. But a lot of counties are trying to make people feel welcome, because that is going to be our future in this state if we want to grow it all. So it was very, very interesting. We are being dropped from that LUCA, that local, what was the name of it for census, local census application, because we need a department in the county to be the contact, and the assessor's office is too busy, and Shar, as you know, is too busy for that kind of thing. But they're still going to work with us
Okay,
and
that's
give
it.
us copies of, and they gave me copies of notices to put them. I told them we'd work on the education of our
Right.
county. So, but it was kind of,
Great.
so, there was also another county, and I was going to actually talk with Shar about this idea before I brought it to the board, but it was on elections, and it mainly had to do with a lot of township elections. They take the registered voting list for for like a township election, and they send a absentee ballot type idea to everybody on that list. And if they have a choice of voting that way, sending it in on time, and then if you don't want to do that, they only open like 3 places around the county where you can go in person and vote. It was kind of an interesting idea, and I got the card of the person who got it going. Blue Earth County is, and they have now even moved it. They had a special election for a state legislator, and they did it, and they got just record amount of replies.
Can you imagine the amount of staff time involved to send absentee
It actually, they
ballots
found
to
out
everyone?
it saved the county money in the long run. But he had the statistics, and I didn't get all that. But I did bring his card for if you wanted information on it.
I think it would save a lot of money on not hiring election judges, but it would be
Election-
very labor intensive.
And
to
machinery,
do all that.
it would cut down on some of your election machines.
So
I don't
instead of having ballots to go to, everybody gets a
if you're on the voter list, you will get one in the mail. And
For
you
every
can-
election.
Well, they're using it for townships now, and it's been a high success for townships. But they used it now for the state office that they just had to.
You know, you wonder if you'd get better voter turnout though, versus like, okay, I gotta go to town
Well, I'm
and
sure
vote.
you would.
Oh, yeah, that's
You know,
what they
right?
said,
I'm
it
sure
just
it would.
really changed their voter turnout.
I still, in the advent of technology, it's too bad you don't have something like in your house or something that you can just like, oh, we're gonna vote on this today, click yes or no, you know, like
Yeah.
something simple, but this is
Yeah,
kind of getting
that's-
towards there where,
Yeah. Anyway,
fill
I
it out
did
and
get
send
some
it in.
information from, I thought that was real interesting.
Yeah,
Because their
very good.
voter turnout has turned out amazing.
right.
So, I'll make it, that's short enough. Long enough, I should say. That's all.
Okay. Well, Justin and I are working on a procurement policy, and we talked about that a little bit this morning already. And we have gotten to the point now where we're working on a rough draft of it, and I hope that I will have that for next week. Not next week, 2 weeks. I ought to have it for 2 weeks, yeah, that ought to work. And the administrative position, thank you, Teresa, and we're going to take a good look at that, and we will come with something fairly concrete on that in 2 weeks also.
And this person will actually look at what we have written up
Yeah.
and work
Would-
with us.
Would
so.
Yeah.
someone
Yeah.
like to make a contact and just see what?
Just-
Yeah, I
Would
said
be-
I could do it.
Oh, okay.
In
This is fairly normal to have in this kind of a situation in a county administrator kind of position. It's very normal to have not just a search committee, but to hire
Yes,
a
that's
professional
not unusual
consultant
for
to
this
do
kind of
that.
position.
It does not mean that we have to necessarily go with what a professional consultant recommends. You saw that in the job search for the coordinator, whatever they call him, the chief administrator of the Minnesota State College thing. I don't know the correct term for it, but they hired a consultant firm, and then they rejected all of the proposed candidates on the first time around and hired somebody to be the interim administrator of that system, and then hired, I think they rehired the same consultant firm, but it doesn't make any difference in any event. They rejected that one also, rejected all of those candidates, and simply hired the person that they had hired as an interim, just took away the interim tag, gave them a 3-year contract. So that is done, that you don't have to accept the candidates chosen or put forward by the
Well,
consultant
another
firm.
thing from
So-
this particular one is, they did it for Steele County, and then after a year, they were not happy with the person that took the job, and the firm came back free of charge and did a new search for them.
Yeah,
which is big.
okay.
In
That's a biggie.
That's
yeah.
a big thing.
well,
Because those people don't come terribly cheap.
No, but they did for Steele County.
Yeah.
before I add to this, do you have more, or do we want to just go right into the administrator discussion?
Pardon me?
Do you have more comment, or do we want to just go right into the administrator discussion?
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say that I think, Teresa, I think this is an excellent key piece to get. So thank you for getting that. I will make contact with this company, let them know what's going on. I guess my question is, do we, I'd like to keep the can going down the road. I mean, keep the can from going down the road too far. So I can make contact. Is there, as far as our preliminary job description that we're going to talk about today?
I would like very much to have somebody from that organization
Look at it.
come and
So,
talk to us or email what we have to them or something, so we get a dialogue going.
right, so I guess that was what my question was today. Can we say that if I make contact with them, that I can forward them what we have them review it, and maybe,
They will come in person to talk to us about it.
okay, so I could
We're probably not
give
quite
them the
ready for that
information.
yet, but
But I mean, if we
yeah.
give them the information,
Yep.
we could set up a time for them to come in and talk to us, and then they would kind of be
Yeah.
aware of our potential
We're not in a super rush, we just.
draft of a job
Yeah.
description, and then they could come in and talk. Is that-
Yep.
I would think, yeah, our next thing is the contact, so that we could, as a board, say, yes, we're willing to, or we're not willing to have these people and find out, do they come down and just give us a spiel first?
Sure.
Or do we
Yes.
have to commit some
Yeah.
money before they give us the spiel?
The spiel
That's
will
what I
include the money. How much
How
you're gonna
much,
charge.
right.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think no matter what, a contact to get that information is probably our next step, really.
So then we'll do that. I'll contact them, get them down to come and talk to us. We can get them our rough draft job description. They can come and do a presentation, and then hopefully after that presentation, we'll have some direction as far as where to proceed
And
further
we
after
actually
that.
have to do an RFP.
Okay.
For them, once they give us the presentation, you know.
After their presentation?
Yeah, because, well, no,
Request
you'll
for
find
proposal.
out that they have to do it ahead of time.
Yeah, I suppose you would okay. I'll call and talk to
Yeah.
them, find out what needs to be done.
I think what
The
you talk to them,
procedure.
you'll get what they'll do, what they won't, and what they'll want.
Yep.
And
call
I,
them right
yeah,
there
like I
at the
said,
meeting.
at least 5 counties that I talked to use this particular person.
Right.
So.
Well, and like Fred said too, I mean, you know.
But then can't we just take their list?
Yeah, I know.
You just did it for this county.
Who's your second on the list? We'll
Right,
take 'em.
we'll take number 2.
Yeah, that's right.
Done.
That would save us a little money.
Now,
Go ahead.
I got one other thing. We had a problem last week. Teresa's already talked about it. There was a bit of a problem a few weeks ago where we had to try to condense a meeting where we had people that had an appointment, and we had to try to get things shortened up. We need a better way of anticipating those kinds of things, because at this point, Shar writes the agenda, and it's kind of on her by herself. And I wonder if we need, or if we should have a second set of eyes looking at that ahead of time before it goes out to the board. It's I don't like to come into a meeting and start amending the agenda or putting restrictions on the agenda at that meeting. I've done that a couple of times. I'm a little uncomfortable with it. What do we do? Do we say, okay, because ultimately the chair is responsible for the conduct of the meeting, and you can't, as chair, you can't say, well, the auditor did it. It's the auditor's fault. You can't do that. You just don't. You have to, as a chair, you have to accept that responsibility. Would we have been able to forestall a couple of the problems that have happened if the chair had looked at the agenda ahead of time and said, well, maybe we need to change the order? I know a couple of us talked about it on the breaks during the last meeting, that, oh boy, we're in trouble here. What we should have done is to have changed that order of the agenda, and that would have given us a little bit more freedom at the end to be able to say, okay, one person can go to that meeting at Mabel, at least then we're represented.
I guess.
But I don't know, and that's why I'm bringing it up. We need to discuss it. I'd like to have a discussion anyway.
I guess
Okay.
I would propose that it would be the chair could take and review the agenda prior to the board. I know in many other forms of government, when we go up to the state legislature and stuff, it's always the chairman that usually is responsible for the meeting, and then ultimately they are the ones responsible for what is or is not approved to be on the agenda. I know years and years ago, it was kind of that way. Like, I know when I chaired and stuff, if Shar had a question or something, she'd say, oh, what do you think about this? You know, should we take this off? Or, I guess I would think
Yeah.
that would be the most appropriate, would just be, and then the chair kind of understands what's been going on with the board meetings to say, oh, this is probably going to take a while. This isn't, you know, maybe we should postpone this until next week because we're not going to have time to deal with it, you know. Because by the time it comes to the board, it's too late.
Well, look,
You know,
we
people are
ran
already scheduled to be
45
here.
minutes behind on everything today.
Yeah.
But when they call Shar to get on the agenda, they go, I need 15 minutes, you know? Well, that doesn't work out. Look at John went a
That's
half
true
hour.
too. Mm-hmm.
You
And of
know,
course, I knew that was coming
that he was.
because I knew I was going to question.
Right, so you knew it was gonna be lengthier.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no problem with giving the board that authority. I just, the only thing I would ask is that you can only kick it down the road the next week and then make a
yeah.
shuffle.
Yeah.
You know, so that you don't give the chair the authority to put it off for 3 months or something.
Or never
No.
put it
Or
on.
never get it on at
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
Well, yeah, no chairman in their right mind wants that.
Right. Wants that responsibility
no,
or problem.
No, because
Right.
it's still a board.
Yes.
Absolutely, you can't. You've
But I
got,
think
you've
you
got to
need
always.
to
You've got
have
to be careful.
some mechanism in place for adjustments. Can we also discuss then, while we're on this, of moving the joint board of health by an hour or something? I mean, I know it's
or
kind of a.
That
pain.
has
We've done it
been tight
11
before.
To have it, but we're running into this more often than not now.
We do, and I guess that would be my suggestion too, because
I mean, especially when I think when we went from 4 to 3, we lengthened our meetings, which is, you know, going to happen. So.
well, and the other thing
Yeah.
though is I think even not even that. I think we just have good discussion now.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even today, we're not really discussing anything that.
I think we should see
It's
about
because we
moving
pushed anything
the
off. It's
Board
just-
of Health to like a Wednesday afternoon instead of a,
Or a
Tuesday.
complete different
Yeah.
day, whichever, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I kind of like keeping things on a Tuesday whenever we can, to not fill up
Yeah.
as many more days, but
But it's an option.
Well,
But,
Board of Health meetings typically take how long?
Hour and a half.
hour and a half.
So
They
it really
usually go
wouldn't.
1 to 2:30.
You know, it wouldn't bother anybody here maybe to have that from 2 o'clock until 3:30
Right.
and just keep it on the same
I
day.
mean, that usually gives us time to get a decent lunch then.
See, and
then
that's
get
the other
over there
problem.
and-
Because, you know, by the time we get down to the board meeting, you don't have time for lunch.
Right.
There's 2 or 3. I'd rather push it
I'd
back.
rather
an
have a
hour.
little extra time than, you know, than to either be late again or not make it again, or like we have in the past, if you do make it, you're skipping lunch and racing
Yeah.
to Mabel and.
And I, to be honest, I wouldn't want to give up our good discussions that we have at these meetings.
Right,
You know,
to
like I
to
wouldn't want
have
to
to
rush it
race
and be
out.
like,
I mean, right now, we'd
If we
already
put
be
a
in trouble
time
for
limit
Mabel.
on Justin, we might shorten our meetings. too.
easy.
I'm also guilty.
Oh, yeah.
All in favor?
Okay,
No, I think we're having good discussions, that we don't, you know, usually we're in such a rush, you get in here, boom, 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 you don't get a chance to sit and hone things out a little bit and bring up, oh, I was gonna bring that up, I was gonna bring this up. I
Yeah,
didn't
and
get
I've
it."
done that many times. I'll come
As soon
home
as
and
you
say,
leave,
oh, I
it's,
wish I forgot to tell you.
While we're talking,
Okay.
you know, and we kind of started this
Now,
with.
the mechanism for working this out,
can work
I'm
with Sean.
assuming that next month people go to the Board of Health meeting at the regular time and they just work it out with them.
We only
Yeah.
have them every 3 months, so
Okay, I'm sorry.
May is
Yeah.
our next one.
Okay, just
So you
let
get
it,
time
let
to
it go
work it
until
out.
then and then talk about it
Discuss
with
it at
them.
that time,
Yeah.
discuss it with them and bring it up.
Because our next
Yeah.
meeting is until May, so we got time to talk about
Yeah.
moving it to 2.
Well, I can communicate with Ms. Vickerman that that discussion is going to be,
That's probably
Coming up.
good, so that.
so that they have a
they
chance to
can
think
kinda
about
talk
it.
about
Right, then they can kind of talk about between them and say, you know, would this be possible for us? And they might have other issue that they run into.
Okay, I'll communicate that to Mabel and we can go from there. Okay, anything else coming here?
The only thing I can think of is, in our land use meeting today, Brian would really like to get his skid steer figured out, and if we're gonna.
Yeah, we're kicking that can down the road too far. We've
Right,
got
well,
to deal
we
with
just
that.
approved equipment purchase today, so how do we keep saying we can't
Yeah, I know.
approve one?
I know.
I figure we got 2 weeks, I'm just about got to, just bring it in.
Yeah,
in
he's
2
going to
weeks,
have
and
to,
we
he's
gotta
going to
make
have
a
to bring it in
decision.
2 weeks. Yeah, absolutely.
The warranty is only got so much time to get the,
Yeah.
get the trade-in value, trade-in that he was guaranteed. He would like to check that one more time and be able to say, I can still get it or I can't get it.
Yeah, yeah.
So our numbers will be the same anyhow, or know what our numbers are to look at. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Closing public comment. A motion for adjournment is in order.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.